we're sort of up against that constantly. That people believe, yeah, that I can. That's the easy button. I'll have this text to SQL thing connected to my whole. We literally had somebody say, "Oh, what would it take to connect this text to SQL to 1,400 tables
data warehouse
across the enterprise?" And we're like, "Well, you might want to be careful about what you're saying here."
Yeah, I mean, you can do it.
Jim,
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do it. And you will ask the question of it, it'll generate SQL, and you will get an answer back. And a lot of times it might generate the right SQL, and it might give you what you expected. But there are really sort of two things going on here. A, it might not generate the correct SQL. So there's some risk there. And B, it really gets back to the business side of the equation. Who's asking the question? What are they asking the question for? What are they trying to do? What's the risk if they do get a wrong answer? Sort of like what negative results could, if they take that data and run with it? And are they in a position, do they know enough about the data that they would even know that they've gotten the wrong answer? Or if they come back tomorrow and ask and think they're asking the same question, hey LLM, or hey agent for me, go give me this answer. If they change the question a little bit, the human may think they're asking the same question. The LLM may go generate the SQL and get you the answer correctly, but it's not exactly the same. So there's a lot of risk in sort of turning over that to a language model. That it gives you just incorrect SQL, but things are getting better there. It's going to take time. But B, you got to be able to know that whether or not it gave you the right answer. And then what is the intent? Yeah. What are you trying to do with it? What's the risk of a wrong answer? It's not that there's not a place for this. There is. But this gets to the business problem, the business question. What are you trying to do with it? And make sure you apply the AI correctly. And where you need to make sure you have exactly the same answer every time, there's sort of different techniques, different guardrails to be used.
I hate to keep beating this analogy to death, but I think it's actually, it is a lot more like a human. In other words, I'm pretty good at writing SQL, or at least I used to be when, before LLMs did it a lot for me, ironically, based on what I'm going to say. But but if you gave me, right, if you just dropped me into a company and you said, here's my 1,400 tables, go write this report for me, right? The odds are very, very high that my first attempt to get that for you is going to be wrong in some sort of way, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's so much more behind what a given table means than just, the columns and rows. Right. And you really wind up and you get this. I'm working with someone right now, and you're going into all of the nuance of the industry you're working in, the way that they like to look at things, the having to wrap your head around, what does this row actually represent? Okay, this row represents, this type of order and this type of environment from this type of user, and what's in the user, how is this getting generated, so I can assess the quality of it. How do people like to do this measure? Because there's two choices, right? Like if, say, I'm working on churn, right? I might have multiple ways I could calculate a churn statistic, right? But if I don't align it with the way that the organization's used to, or that makes sense in this domain for that data, it's going to be wrong, at least in the sense of not matching what the user who asked me for the report is expecting.
Right.
And that's true. I mean, like I say, just drop any good data analyst into a raw situation, and they're going to struggle for that until they get the right context and understanding of everything. And I think so I think, in those situations where all this right additional information has been given to the LLM about what it's trying to do, and the data set behind it, it actually can do a pretty good job very often of writing the SQL. But if you just say, here's 1,400 tables, go nuts, and pray that it gets it right.
It will.
It will.
It will go nuts.
So it takes, so it all just goes back to that, having the right, deeper context around what you're working with. Correct.
But there, I'm gonna a little bit of a call out here. There are prominent vendors providing solutions that are putting their clients, their customers at risk and not fully explaining this problem. They're saying, hey, and I don't want to name names here, but think of some of the biggest sort of database vendors out there now who have SQL generation capabilities, and they are encouraging their clients to use these in broad-based ways, and not just sort of the smart data analyst who understands the data and will understand if the answer that came back isn't exactly right, but way out there on the edge with business users who, for them AI is magic, and they don't know enough about the underlying data to potentially know that what they got back isn't right. And I think it's very inappropriate in terms of some of the messaging that's going on in the marketplace. But we're all sort of in the hype cycle, and it is what it is.
We see a lot of that where, and again, it's sort of led by teams that are sort of maybe analyst centric, right? So their job every day, they get questions from users, they're writing SQL queries every day, and sort of the dream is, I could have this tool and just hand that to the business user and they can self-serve. I totally get that, and that's where I think this sort of they're maybe not quite understanding like really where to draw the line depending on who the user is, what problem they're trying to solve, and what their capabilities are. What we're telling people is, look, these are great tools. We have the same, we've implemented the same kinds of things. And what we'll tell people though is, look, really great for an analyst who can understand the SQL, check it, make sure it's right, and then maybe package that up for a business user. But if you have a business user that doesn't have these skills and they're in a high stakes situation, they're trying to make these business decisions pretty quickly, it's important to then take those things that would be call it non-deterministic in the output of an LLM and make it deterministic, so that you can say, yes, this has been vetted by an expert,
right?
And when we look at market share this way, it's going to do it the right way. It's going to hit the right tables. It's going to say the right things, and so you can count on it to make a business decision. It's important to make sure that those are sort of in a safe box and made deterministic for those users in those use cases. Mike, anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a case that comes to mind for me is very, very personal. I lived in Prague. I was learning Czech, and I said to someone on the street, what I meant to say was, I don't speak Czech, right? And in Czech, every word gets conjugated with the masculine, feminine, past, future, whatever. And
right.
And she turned around and walked away from me very angry, right? And so I went to the office and said to somebody that was a native speaker, I said, what do you think I said? This is how I said it. What did I say? And she said, you meant to say, I don't speak Czech. And what you said is, you should not speak Czech woman. Right. So what's the difference? Right. So
that went over well.
Czech woman.
Right. So what happened there? Well, I was incapable of understanding the results that I was presenting. Right. That is what happened.
Right.
And so what happens if a business user asks a question, gets back some SQL, runs it, and says, look, things are great, right? They're interpreting something that they do not understand by doing that, right? So we have to overlay the model as a something that tests itself before that content is presented back to the user. And the way that this is done is it's so interesting. There's so many layers of the AI work where AI helps you solve AI problems. So a really good example, and I hear this all the time, LLMs hallucinate, hair on fire, can't use that stuff.
Yeah.
It's only good for pirate jokes, right? Here's the way to the first easy pro tip, how to stop hallucinations. But the first thing you ask an LLM is, hey, here's a bunch of stuff. Can you answer this question? Yes or no? Don't tell me anything else. Just tell me, yes or no, you can't answer the question. If it says no, don't ask it to answer the question. If it says yes, it probably won't hallucinate, right? But if you just ask it the question cold and expect it to answer, I don't know, you're never going to see that happen. Why? Well, because it was trained on fairy tales and novels and TV shows and K1 reports, or all these. It's trained on everything to finish the story. So if you never set it up to fail, like Stu was saying, it's a junior analyst. If you never set it up to fail, it won't. If you check its results, they'll be more accurate, right? You have to find those cases where you need a ton of work done at that entry level that you can define well enough with instructions that you don't set it up to ever do the wrong thing, and make it always so that the user can interpret the way that it was done and decide if it's right or not. You're golden, right?
Yep.